It was a bright Saturday evening. The grand music school's auditorium sparkled with lights. Curtains of deep red hung across the stage. The seats were filled with proud parents, eager students, music lovers, and special guests. Everyone was dressed their best. It was the school's biggest event of the year, the annual talent show. Each year, students from around the city came to show their talent. Some would sing, some would play instruments, others danced or performed unique acts. This year, the excitement was even higher. Why? Because Mr. Victor Stein, a world-famous pianist, was one of the guest judges. Victor Stein had played in every great hall across the world. He was a legend, but he was also feared. His reviews were sharp. His words were cold. He didn't like beginners, and he didn't believe in kindness while judging. He believed in perfection and wasn't afraid to humiliate someone who lacked it. "Let's hope we hear real talent tonight," he had said during the opening speech. "Not just noise in the name of music." The audience laughed politely, but some students in the line backstage looked nervous. Behind the stage curtain, Elijah, a small, thin 13-year-old boy, stood quietly with his white cane. His head was slightly tilted up, as if listening to the sounds of the crowd. He wore a simple blue shirt, old brown pants, and slightly dusty shoes. He looked nothing like the other confident performers. Elijah was blind. He had lost his sight when he was just 5. He wasn't rich. His mother worked at a grocery store. He had no music teacher. But he had one thing. He loved music more than anything in the world. He had learned to play the piano by ear. He remembered every sound, every note, every feeling. A volunteer touched his arm gently and said, "You're next." Elijah nodded slowly. He tapped his cane twice, found the path to the stage, and began to walk forward. The lights dimmed. The AITA announcer called, "Next up is Elijah. He will perform a piano piece." Some people clapped softly. Some looked confused. When Elijah stepped onto the stage, the room grew quiet. Whispers began. "Is he blind? Why is he alone? Wait, is this a joke?" Mr. Stein raised an eyebrow. He leaned forward in his seat, already annoyed. Elijah walked slowly toward the piano. He touched the edge of the bench. Then he gently felt the keys. His fingers moved across the surface like someone greeting an old friend. Victor Stein leaned back and said loudly, "This should be quick." A few people laughed. Others looked away, uncomfortable. Elijah heard the words. But he didn't speak. He didn't even frown. He just sat still for a moment. His hands rested lightly on the keys. His head was slightly bowed. In the front row, Elijah's mother sat with both hands on her chest. She looked proud, but her eyes were wet. She knew her son's heart. She knew how many nights he had stayed awake, playing that old keyboard in their living room. She knew he wasn't nervous, but focused. A few judges looked at their watches. One muttered, "Does he even know what he's doing?" Then something strange happened. One of the younger judges, a woman named Ms. Dahlia, leaned in closer. She wasn't looking at the piano. She was looking at Elijah's hands. They weren't shaking, they weren't stiff. They were perfectly relaxed. She whispered, "He's done this before." Elijah lifted his head slowly. He didn't face the audience, but he seemed to look through them. Then softly, so softly that it was almost like a breath, he began to press the first key, but instead of playing, he paused. His fingers hovered just over the notes. The suspense in the room grew heavy. It felt like time had stopped. "Victor." Stein rolled his eyes. "Get on with it," he said. Still, Elijah didn't respond. He touched one note, a low, deep key, then another, a soft, high note. He pressed them again, this time with feeling. The notes echoed through the silent hall like a whisper in the wind. Some people blinked. Others leaned forward. This wasn't just a child playing notes. There was emotion in those two sounds. Elijah gently adjusted his seat. He raised both hands. And then, with his eyes closed and his heart open, he began to play. But what he played next, was something no one in the room was prepared for. To be continued. Elijah's fingers moved across the piano keys like they were dancing. The first few notes were soft, almost like a whisper. A quiet hush fell over the auditorium. Even the whispers from the crowd disappeared. Every person was listening now. No one expected this. The blind boy, small, quiet, and alone, was playing something beautiful. It wasn't just music. It was emotion. It was a story. Each note was smooth, gentle, and full of soul. The melody rose like a wave and then fell. Soft rain. It wasn't a song people knew. It wasn't from a famous composer. This music felt personal. Mr. Victor Stein sat back in his seat. His smirk disappeared. His fingers, which were tapping the judge's table in boredom before, had stopped moving. He leaned forward, watching closely. His eyes narrowed. Where have I heard that style before? Ms. Dahlia, the young female judge beside him, was smiling. Her eyes were wide and her head moved slightly with the rhythm. She whispered, "It's not just playing. He's speaking through music." In the front row, Elijah's mother covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes were shining with tears. She had heard her son play this piece 100 times at home, but never like this. Tonight it was different. This time, he wasn't just playing for himself. He was playing for everyone who had ever been laughed at, for every child told they weren't enough, for every blind person treated like a burden. His fingers sped up. The notes became powerful, almost like thunder. Then they slowed again, like a soft breeze. Every change had meaning. His heart was guiding his hands. The audience was frozen. No one blinked. No one moved. And then, something strange happened. Victor Stein stood up. Ms. Dahlia looked at him, surprised. "Victor." He didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Elijah's hands. He walked slowly toward the edge of the stage. People turned to look at him, confused. Victor's mind was spinning. That style, that sound, it reminded him of something. Something from long ago. Elijah, he whispered under his breath. Back on the stage, Elijah continued to play, unaware of anything else. He didn't know who was watching. He didn't care who was judging. The piano was his world. And in this moment, he was free. Suddenly, one of the keys stuck slightly, an old flaw in the school piano. Elijah didn't panic. He smiled, yes, actually smiled, and adjusted his flow. He turned the mistake into a new part of the melody, weaving it in like it was always meant to be there. The crowd gasped quietly. Did he just fix that on the spot? Someone whispered. That's not possible, another said. That takes years of training. Victor's mouth fell slightly open. He looked around. Who trained this boy? He asked out loud. Ms. Dahlia replied gently, No one. The school principal said he's self-taught. He plays everything by ear. Victor looked shocked. Backstage, the other student performers had stopped warming up. They stood silently in the hallway, listening to Elijah's music floating through the air. Even the stage workers had frozen. One whispered, This boy. He's better than half the professionals I've heard. As the final part of Elijah's song began, the audience felt something change. It wasn't just about talent anymore. It was about something bigger. The music was telling a story of pain, struggle, and hope, of a boy who lived in a world that could not see him, and yet here he was, making the world stop and listen. Elijah hit the final note. A single, clear, soft sound that rang out into the silence like a prayer. Then, silence. For 5 whole seconds, no one clapped, no one moved. They were too stunned. Then, a single clap from the back of the room. Then another, and another. In seconds, the entire hall was on their feet. Clapping, cheering, whistling, some were crying. Elijah sat still, unsure what was happening. His head tilted, listening. He smiled. Victor Stein didn't clap. He just stared. His hands, clenched into fists, not in anger, but in shock. He turned to the other judges. That boy, he's more than just a pianist. What do you mean? Asked Ms. Dahlia. Victor looked back at the stage and said softly, He plays like someone I knew, Someone who changed my life. Suspense hung in the air. Backstage, someone called, "Elijah, you can come down now." But Elijah didn't move right away. He touched the keys one last time, like saying goodbye. Then he stood slowly and walked off stage. The room was still clapping, but behind the curtain, something even bigger was about to begin. As Elijah stepped off the stage, the roaring applause still echoed in the hall behind him. He held his white cane tightly and moved carefully, guided by sound and memory. He had no idea his performance had stunned the audience, or that it had shaken one man more than anyone else, Victor Stein. The famous pianist wasn't clapping. He was still staring at the empty piano bench with a face full of confusion and something deeper, something like regret. He whispered to himself, "It can't be." Ms. Dahlia leaned toward him. "Victor, what's wrong?" Victor didn't answer. He turned and walked quickly out of the judges' section, heading backstage. Meanwhile, Elijah was in the waiting area behind the curtain. He reached for the wall and sat quietly on a bench. The loud noise from the crowd had died down, but inside him the music still played. His fingers twitched slightly, remembering every note he had just performed. A voice broke the silence. "You play like someone I once knew." Elijah turned his head. "Who's there?" "It's Victor Stein," the man replied. Elijah tilted his head. He recognized the name, the judge, the famous pianist, the one who had mocked him before he played. Elijah didn't reply. He stayed quiet, waiting. Victor sat beside him. For a few seconds he said nothing. Then softly he asked, "Where did you learn to play like that?" Elijah gave a small smile. "I listen. I feel. That's all I've ever done." Victor nodded slowly. "That piece you played, did you write it?" Elijah nodded. "Yes, I wrote it for someone I never met." Victor's heart skipped. "Who?" Elijah's voice dropped. "My father. My mom said he was a pianist, too, but he died before I was born." Victor leaned forward. "What was his name?" "Elijah Bennett Sr." Victor froze. His eyes widened. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "Elijah Bennett Sr.?" he repeated. Elijah nodded. "Do you know that name?" Victor sat back in shock. His mind raced through memories. Years ago, when he was young and unknown, there was one man who believed in him, one man who shared his music freely, one man who had once told him, "Music doesn't come from eyes, it comes from the soul." That man's name was Elijah Bennett. Victor's voice trembled. "I knew him, your father. He was one of the best I ever met." Elijah's lips parted slightly. "Really?" "Yes," Victor said. "He was kind, talented, humble. He helped me when no one else would, and then one day he vanished. I heard rumors he died in an accident." Elijah nodded slowly. "Yeah. My mom told me he was hit by a car late at night while coming back from work." Victor looked down, ashamed. "I mocked you when you came on stage. I thought you'd waste our time. I didn't realize I was about to hear the music of a man I owed so much to, through his son." The boy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It's okay. People judge what they don't understand." Victor looked at the boy's calm face, and something inside him broke. His pride, his ego, all melted. "Elijah," Victor said, "I want to help you. Your talent. The world needs to hear it. You can go far, farther than even your father did." The boy tilted his head. "Why?" "Do you want to help me now?" Victor paused. Then, in a rare moment of truth, he said, "Because your father helped me when no one else did, and I never got to thank him. Maybe this is my chance." Back in the hall, the next performer was getting ready, but the mood was different. The audience kept talking about the blind boy. Some even asked if the show should pause to let what they just witnessed sink in. The host stepped on stage again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just seen something special tonight." The crowd cheered again at the mention of Elijah's name, but something bigger was coming. Victor returned to the judges' table and whispered something to the host. The host nodded and smiled wide. We have a surprise announcement. Please stay with us after the show for a special moment you won't want to miss. Backstage, Elijah returned to his mother. She hugged him tight. You made the world listen, baby, she whispered. You made your daddy proud tonight. Elijah smiled and said softly, I think I met someone who knew him. She looked surprised. Who? Before Elijah could answer, Victor approached them. He looked at Elijah's mother and stopped. Eliza? He asked gently. She gasped. Victor. They stared at each other. You were at our wedding, she said. Victor nodded. And I promised your husband I'd look after his family if anything ever happened to him. I failed for years, but maybe now it's not too late. Suspense hung in the air as Elijah stood between them, a son of music standing at the edge of something greater than any of them could imagine. That night, Elijah sat on his bed, at home, still dressed in the same clothes he wore to the talent show. He held his white cane gently in one hand and felt the piano keys in his mind with the other. Every note, every pause, every moment on stage still echoed inside him. But outside his small bedroom window, the world had already changed. His mother, Eliza, stood in the living room staring at her phone. Her hands were shaking, her eyes wide. The video of Elijah's performance had just been uploaded to social media by someone from the audience. In just 2 hours, it had over 500,000 views. People were commenting nonstop. I've never cried this hard over a piano performance. Who is this blind boy? He's a gift from heaven. Someone get this kid a record deal, Eliza called out. Elijah, baby, come here. Elijah walked slowly, guided by sound. What's wrong, Mom? He asked. She gently placed the phone in his hands and helped him feel the screen. You're famous. Everyone's talking about you. You've gone viral. Elijah raised his eyebrows. Viral? She laughed softly. That means the whole world just heard your song. Across town, Victor Stein was sitting in a dark room, watching the same video on a large screen. He had watched it 5 times already. But he wasn't just watching the performance. He was watching the hands, the fingers, the emotion. That's Elijah's blood, he whispered. That's his father's soul in that music. Victor picked up the phone. Hello? A voice answered. Carla, cancel all my appointments for the next week. I have something more important to do. The next morning, Elijah woke up to the sound of birds singing outside and reporters shouting on the front porch. Is Elijah Bennett here? How does it feel to be a music sensation overnight? Can he play another song for us? Elijah stayed calm. He sat on the sofa while his mom tried to keep the cameras outside. But inside the house, a more personal moment was waiting. Victor Stein had arrived. He stepped into their home not as a judge, not as a celebrity, but as an old friend. Eliza, he said gently. We need to talk. She nodded and sat down, across from him. Elijah listened carefully, hearing every breath, every pause. I watched the video, Victor said, and I realized your son isn't just talented. He's a reminder of everything I forgot, of everything your husband stood for. Eliza smiled softly. You knew him better than most. You know he never cared about fame. He just wanted his music to touch people. Victor turned to Elijah. And you've done that, son, in just one night. Elijah tilted his head. I only played what I felt. I didn't expect all this. Victor placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. The world needs more of what you feel. Later that day, Victor made an announcement on live television. I, Victor Stein, am stepping down from the judging panel of the National Youth Music League, and instead, I will personally mentor Elijah Bennett, the blind prodigy who reminded me what music is truly about. The crowd gasped, but Victor wasn't finished. I knew his father. He was my teacher, my guide, and my friend, and I failed him when he needed help, but I will not fail his son. Meanwhile, back at Elijah's school, things were different too. Kids who once ignored him now clapped when he entered the hallway. Teachers treated him like a celebrity. One student, the same boy who used to laugh when Elijah practiced in the music room, walked up and said, "Hey, I'm sorry, man, I was wrong." Elijah nodded politely. "It's okay, I'm still the same." But inside, Elijah knew things had changed, not just around him, but inside him too. That night, Elijah sat again at his piano. No cameras, no lights, just him and the keys. His mom stood nearby, smiling. "Want to play something new?" she asked. Elijah smiled. "Yeah, I think I will." He placed his fingers on the keys and began to write. A new song, a new beginning. But outside, as Elijah played in peace, a shadow from the past was watching. A man in a coat standing under a tree across the street held an old photograph in his hand. It showed Elijah's father, and someone else beside him. The stranger stared at the house and whispered, "The boy is better than I thought, but he's not ready yet." Then he turned and walked into the night. It had been 2 weeks since Elijah's performance went viral. The internet was still buzzing. Music schools were calling. Journalists were sending gifts. Elijah was polite and quiet through it all, but deep down he just wanted to play music in peace. Victor Stein visited often now. He brought music books, exercises, and stories about Elijah's late father, a man Victor once called the only true genius I ever knew. But one morning something arrived that even Victor wasn't expecting. A dark gray envelope was left at Elijah's door. There was no stamp, no return address, just a golden seal pressed into the flap. It looked ancient. Elijah felt the envelope with his hands. "It's strange," he said. His mother gently opened it for him and read the short note inside. "You are invited to the Solstice Sonata, a private piano contest for the world's best undiscovered talent. No cameras, no fame, just music and truth. If you accept, come alone. Instructions will follow." There was no signature. Victor stared at the letter. "I've heard of this," he whispered. "It's a secret competition. They say only one pianist wins each decade." Elijah sat quietly, thinking. "Do you think I should go?" Victor nodded. "Yes, but with great care. This contest isn't about applause. It's about facing something deeper." 2 nights later, another letter came. This time it was a map. A single red dot marked an old building near the forest's edge. 3 towns away, the letter said, "Midnight. No escorts, no delay. Bring only your hands." At first, Elijah's mother refused. "You're not going alone into some dark place," she said. "It's not safe." But Victor said something that changed her mind. "Eliza, this may be the same contest your husband entered. The one he never spoke about." She froze. He came back changed, like he saw something no one else did. I think it's time Elijah knew the truth. The night came. The air was cold. Elijah, wearing a simple coat and scarf, walked to the edge of the forest with his cane. A man in a hooded coat waited near a black car. "You Elijah?" the man asked. "Yes," Elijah said calmly. "No one's ever come blind." "Before," the man muttered, then opened the door. The drive was silent. Trees rushed past. The moon followed them. Finally, the car stopped at an old stone building hidden by vines and fog. It looked like a temple. The man handed Elijah a small piece of paper. 1 hour, 1 song, 1 truth. Then he vanished into the dark. Inside, a long hall echoed with silence. Elijah walked slowly, his hand on the wall. He entered a wide room with only one spotlight shining on a grand piano in the center. It looked old but powerful, like it had a soul. 12 people sat in the shadows watching. A voice called out, "Begin." Elijah took a breath, sat at the piano, and placed his hands gently on the keys. Then, he played. The music he played that night had no name. It was not written. It was not practiced. It was born from memory. He played the laughter of his childhood, the sound of his mother's voice, the ache of losing his father, the loneliness of blindness, the wonder of hearing life like a song. The judges said nothing. They only listened, and as the final note faded, a tear fell from one of their eyes. But just as Elijah stood to leave, a cold voice echoed from the shadows. "He's not ready." Everyone turned. Another man stood there now. Someone Elijah had never met but somehow felt familiar. He stepped into the light. He was tall, pale, with cold gray eyes and long fingers. "Elijah Bennett," the man said. "You have talent. But talent alone won't win this. Your father learned that the hard way." Elijah clenched his fists. "Who are you?" The man smiled cruelly. "A rival. I was once your father's greatest student, until he chose you instead." He pointed a long finger at the judges. "I challenge him. One final round. Tomorrow night. No help, no mercy." The judges whispered among themselves. Then one judge stood. "Very well," she said. "Tomorrow you shall both play, and only one name will leave written in our book." Elijah walked out that night shaken, not just because of the challenge, but because deep down, he remembered the man's voice. It sounded like someone his father once feared. Back home, Victor was waiting on the porch. Elijah said quietly, "They knew Dad." Victor nodded. "Then you're standing where he once stood, but you must finish what he never could." The night was cold again. Clouds covered the moon, but Elijah's heart felt warmer than ever. He stood outside the old building. The stone walls looked darker this time. The forest around it was silent, like it was waiting. Elijah walked in slowly, alone, but he wasn't afraid anymore. Inside, the same long hall welcomed him. The same spotlight shone on the piano. The same 12 judges sat in the shadows, their faces serious, their eyes watching. But tonight he wasn't alone on stage. The mysterious man from the night before stood across from him, dressed in a black suit, pale face, cold eyes. He looked like he hadn't smiled in years. "Ready to lose, boy?" he whispered. Elijah didn't answer. The lead judge stood. Her voice echoed in the great hall. "Tonight is the final duel. You, both will play. No names, no introductions, only the soul will speak." She pointed to the mystery man. "You begin." The man cracked his fingers and sat at the piano. For a moment there was silence, then, boom! He struck the first note like thunder. His fingers danced like fire. The music was fast, sharp, and powerful. It was full of pride, full of anger. Each note was like a sword, cutting the silence. The judges leaned forward. Even Elijah could feel the room shake with the man's music. When he finished, the hall went still. No one clapped, no one blinked. He stood, smirking. "Follow that." Elijah walked up slowly. He sat down, adjusted his posture, and gently touched the keys. He didn't attack the piano. He listened to it, then softly, he began. His notes were light at first, like a bird singing at sunrise. Then slowly the song grew, warmer, deeper. He played memories. He played hope. He played pain, and how it turned into strength. He didn't try to impress anyone. He just spoke through music. One of the judges quietly wiped a tear. Another placed a hand over her chest, and the rival's smirk slowly faded. When Elijah stopped, the room was completely silent. Even the wind outside seemed to wait. The judges stood. The lead judge raised her hand. "One of you played with power. The other played with truth." She turned to Elijah. "The Book of Sound will now carry your name." A golden book was brought out. The judge wrote something inside. Then she gently placed her hand on Elijah's shoulder. "You have awakened something ancient, something lost." The rival shouted, "No, he's just a boy. He's blind." The judges looked at him coldly. One of them replied, "He sees more than you ever will." The man screamed in anger, stormed out of the hall, and disappeared into the night. Later, Elijah sat quietly in the same hall. The crowd had left. The lights were low. The lead judge sat beside him. "You know," she said, "your father once stood in this same room." Elijah turned his head. "Did he win?" She smiled gently. "No, he walked away. He said the world needed music, not more battles. But you brought it back. She gave him a small key made of silver. This is your father's. He left it here for the one who could finish what he started. Elijah held the key tightly. It felt like peace. That night, Victor waited outside the building, leaning against his car. Elijah walked toward him, holding the silver key. Victor's eyes widened. You did it, Elijah nodded. I didn't play to win, I just played, Victor chuckled. That's why you won. As they drove home, Elijah opened the key's tiny box. Inside was a folded piece of paper with music notes. A song. Never. Played before. Victor gasped. That's your father's final piece. Elijah traced the notes with his fingers. The next day, the whole city buzzed with news about Elijah. Everyone wanted to see the boy who won the great music duel. The news cameras, the reporters, and music lovers filled the concert hall. Elijah stood backstage, holding the folded paper with his father's song. His hands trembled, but his heart was strong. This was not just a song. It was a message from his father, a gift to the world. The stage lights shone bright. The crowd grew quiet as Elijah walked to the piano. He looked at the audience. They looked back with hope and curiosity. Slowly, Elijah sat down. He placed his fingers on the keys and took a deep breath. As he played, the music flowed like a gentle river. It was soft, full of feeling and full of memories. Every note told a story. Stories of love, loss, courage, and peace. The crowd listened, mesmerized. Some had tears in their eyes. Some smiled, remembering their own dreams. The song was not just music. It was a language everyone understood. Suddenly, the old man who lost the duel the night before walked in quietly. He stood at the back listening. His face was calm, but his eyes showed respect. When the last note played, the hall exploded with applause. People stood and clapped for minutes. Elijah stood up, bowing humbly. The old man slowly walked toward him. You played with the heart, he said softly. Your father's song. It healed me. Elijah smiled. Music is for everyone. That night, the news spread far beyond the city. Videos of Elijah playing the lost song went viral. Millions around the world watched and felt something new, hope. People shared stories of their own struggles and dreams. The song inspired them to believe again. Elijah became a symbol, a reminder that true strength comes from the heart, not just from skill or power. Months later, Elijah received a letter from the music school. They offered him a full scholarship to study music, a chance to follow his dreams. He called Victor Stein. Thank you for believing in me. Victor laughed. You taught me more than I taught you. Elijah looked out the window, holding the silver key. He whispered, This is just the beginning.